All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Long and Winding Railroad here at Post Wrestling. We're at episode 44. Can't believe I've done 44 of these things. And today's a special episode because we're going to be returning to our biography episode. And the last one we did was Stan Hansen. And today we're going to do maybe the greatest of all time. Some people might argue other people, but I would argue possibly Jumbo is the greatest of all time. That's right. I spoiled it. It's Jumbo Tsuruta. We're going to look at Jumbo Tsuruta today. And joining me today is a person doing like great work, looking at the history of Japanese professional wrestling by doing a lot of translation work. And he's going to tell you where you can find a lot of his stuff when I introduce him. And his name is Cameren Lee. Cameren, how are you?
I'm doing all right. This is something I was telling you before the show. I've been wanting to do this show with you about Jumbo for a couple of years now. In fact, I posted a lot of stuff. I don't want to bury the lead. I go by Kinch Stalker on Pro Wrestling Only. It's a dumb name. Don't ask about it. For about 3 years, I've been writing. What I do is I take Japanese, I process and I get Japanese stuff translated. That is, contemporary coverage and retrospective stuff. The stuff that I'll be talking about with Jumbo comes from a 2020 biography by Kagehiro Osano, another book, and a couple other books and interviews that I'll mention along the way. But basically, what I do is, a lot of ProRes coverage over here is us talking about what we think about these matches aesthetically, and then sort of spitballing and speculating about a lot of stuff. We don't go back to the journalism there a lot. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of genuine insight that has just gone unrecognized in the West for decades. And my job is to try to bridge that gap, Oh,
and I follow you on Twitter, and I started seeing your posts, and I was just like, wow, this is a lot of great information here. So I thought I'm gonna get you to come on, do this Jumbo thing. Because you post a lot about Jumbo, and I've learned a lot about Jumbo. And then also you also do a lot of posting over at the Pro Wrestling Only forums, which is a great site. If you're a longtime like wrestling forum message poster like I was over at DVDR, Pro Wrestling Only is a great place to kind of escape the hellhole that is social media these days, especially one's owned by megalomaniacal billionaires who are ruining a certain site. We won't mention him, but yes, you can go over to Pro Wrestling Only. I haven't gone there so much recently, but I kind of venture over there. Hey, what's some interesting discussion happening over there? And you post a lot over there. And
I posted about 60 biographies of other dudes. Thing I'm going to plug real quick. A couple months ago, I wrote a big bio of Killer Khan based on his own autobiography. So I'm really proud of that. So
all you people listening to this who are like, interested in like history and want to get something beyond like our own speculations, and people who my Japanese is I call my Japanese level survivable. That's my Japanese level.
I don't know Dick. I don't know. Or sorry, I don't mean to work blue. I don't know any Japanese.
It's okay.
But, yeah.
No problem. Don't be nervous, Cameron. It's all good.
No, it's okay.
But we're going to talk about Jumbo Tsuruta, and my own personal like kind of exposure to Jumbo Tsuruta started when I was a kid, because I would read the After mags, and I would get Inside Wrestling. I think that was a magazine that had they had a list of all the champions across the world, like in Mexico, in the United States, and the different territories in the United States and Canada and Japan, including New Japan Pro Wrestling and All Japan Pro Wrestling. So then I'd see these listings. It's like sometimes I go through, oh, who are these people? I don't know who these people are. Oh, who's this? The Road Warriors are working in Japan. They're the international tag team champions in Japan. They beat like some guy named Jumbo Tsuruta. And then of course, at the time when I started following wrestling as a kid, and the champions of the three major companies, which would be the WWF, the NWA, and the AWA, were Hogan, Flair, and Martel. And then who did Martel beat to become the AWA world champion was Jumbo Tsuruta. And then you start watching a bit of AWA television, and they reference like Rick Martel beat Jumbo Tsuruta, and then who's this guy? And then later on, I discover him, and then I start tape trading, and then I get tapes, and then it's like, okay, you discover, like Misawa, Kawada, Kobashi, Taue, and then, okay, who made these guys? Well, the guy who made them was Jumbo Tsuruta, and then you go back, you discover Tenryu and Jumbo and Stan Hansen, Brody, all these people, but
the Funks, all that good
the
stuff.
Funks, all that stuff, and it's not until like I'd say later in my life that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna deep dive further back than the 90s into the 80s, and then it's like, oh geez, it's Jumbo, what a guy. And then I I don't know, I'd say in the last 10 years I've really come to put Jumbo really high in my echelon of my favorite wrestlers of all time. He's always floating in my top 3. In the last, I'd say 5 years, he's been floating in my top 3. The other 2 usually who float in there, it goes in and out. It just depends on how I feel, but it's usually Ricky Steamboat and Jushin Thunder Liger. And then, Jumbo has kind of, for the All Japan representation, Jumbo usually replaces Kobashi. But then sometimes I'd be like, I'll watch a bunch of Kobashi, and then Kobashi goes back in there. It depends on how I feel. So
yeah.
But for you, Cameron, what's you obviously love Jumbo Tsuruta because you have a bunch of, like stuff, books and magazines featuring him. There's a poster of him flexing.
Doing a gut wrench on Billy Robinson, November 76, right back there. I actually have 2 posters on the other wall. I'm not going to show them to you. My laptop doesn't have its battery. If I unplug it, it's going to black. But just trust me. I'll give you when we drop the episode, I'll retweet it with these pictures as my evidence. But anyway, I'm kind of an interloper here. I only got into All Japan and really only got into wrestling about 5 years ago. In 2019, that might surprise you. The short version is that I spent a lot of my life thinking that wrestling was interesting, but I was not into the WWE at all. It just didn't appeal to me. My cousin had a DVD of like One Night Stand, the first One Night Stand, and I'd watch that and be like, this rules. I understand why. And I remember I'd show my foster brothers the WWE ECW thinking it was going to be like that. I felt like I was being personally gaslit. So something like that. I spent years thinking wrestling must have been cool at one point, but it wasn't for me. Then in the late 2010s, as the decade was ending, I learned about All Japan because I think it was because AEW had gotten announced, and I was thinking maybe there is something here for me. And I just got deep into All Japan to the point where by the end of the year, I was wanting to do I was watching Joseph Montesilio's videos, former or past Long and Winding Royal Road guest. And I was thinking, I want to do those videos, but for Jumbo. Now, I'm not really doing that anymore. My ultimate goal is I want to write a book about Jumbo Tsuruta. That's kind of on hold. I'm hoping I can get a couple interviews there. But basically, yeah, I'm kind of new to this, but I know some stuff that I'm a young gun, but even if you've been watching Jumbo, for 25 years, if you're listening to this, I've got something to say. You're going to learn something here. I promise you.
Well, that's why you're here. But like, what is it about Jumbo that like captured your imagination to the point like you're doing this with me? You want to write a book about him?
Jumbo is the interesting thing is I have a weird relationship. I love Jumbo, but I see Jumbo as sort of, and we're going to get into this in the episode. He's an interesting figure because he wasn't quite what people wanted him to be. I love his wrestling. Some of my favorite matches on tape in the 70s are against him, and in the 80s and in the 90s. But there's a really interesting arc to Jumbo's career. That's why I'm drawn to his story. I don't know if I don't really do greatest wrestlers, but my interest is more in challenging a lot of narratives about Jumbo and kind of giving some insight into why All Japan was the way it became, how All Japan became what it was before the King's Road, before the road was paved, and also kind of what it wasn't. And Jumbo, you need Jumbo's story to tell. Jumbo's story is the best way to tell All Japan's story, because Baba's story starts too early, then you leaves right at a bad moment. Other people join too late to really tell the story. So that's what it kind of is for me. If I can get Jumbo's story just right, I can get All Japan, or at least, Baba era All Japan just right.
Well, I mean, hopefully we can get Jumbo's story out
Absolutely
on this episode here. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to just do a quick biography of his early life. He was born Tomomi Tsuruta, born March 25th, 1951 okay, so I have different sources saying he's born Yamanashi City, but then it's also Makioka. Which one is it?
It was Makioka. So basically, with Japan after the war, they consolidated a bunch of little villages together to get public funding for stuff. It was it was actually another village. I think it was Nakamaki. 3 villages became Makioka when he was 3, and then that got merged in after he died. So Makioka, that's what they say.
Okay, so he's born in Makioka
it was Kurashina. Kurashina was the village.
Before, okay, so officially it's Makioka.
Yeah,
that's where he was born, in Yamanashi Prefecture. He grew up in Yamanashi City, and as growing up as a kid, he played a variety of sports while attending Hikawa Senior High School. So early on in his life, he was always very interested in sports and athletics.
Yeah, Yamanashi is kind of a backwater. That's where, for people listening, it's this kind of it's next to, like, Tokyo's to the east, but it's this backwater that's surrounded by a bunch of mountains. Mount Fuji is in Yamanashi. Keiji Muto and Shingo Takagi are a couple notable names that also hail from Yamanashi. Jumbo, the short version, he was born to a farming family. He was the younger of 2 sons, though he had a couple of half siblings from an mom's earlier marriage. He was into there's a lot of myth, a lot of kayfabe around Jumbo's early life. I believe that my guess is that it was created by Takashi Yamada, who was that husky voice color commentator that you hear on a lot of early All Japan. But basically the story is he was an athletic child. By high school, his main sport was basketball. They got into, they didn't win nationals. That's an error in Meltzer's obituary, but they did get to nationals. They did the championship. There's a couple of great photos of Jumbo. He was the ace of the team. He graduated from there in 1969. He left. He enrolled at Chuo University, and he wanted to do. So the thing with Jumbo is, apparently Jumbo told Fumi Saito that he had wanted to be a pro wrestler since the 6th grade, which means he probably would have seen the JWA around 1962. I have read that he did see the big Ricky Dozon Destroyer match in 1963. Then in 1964, he was very strongly affected by the Tokyo Olympics, which he saw on TV, and he had this dream of becoming an Olympic wrestler. At least that's what his story is. So he goes into college. He goes into college at a really bad time because there's a lot of leftist strikes. So, like, basically school is out for the entirety of 1969. And this rural kid is just in the city, and all he can do is play basketball. And he was that was a real big strain on him. But basically he, as what he said was, he didn't think that he would be able to make the Olympics if he stuck in basketball. He thought that an individual sport would be a better choice. So he thought, even though this guy did not really have a martial arts background, he flirted with sumo on it one summer vacation back in 1964, but that was it. He wanted to. The story was that he went to the wrestling. I should get my notes here. The story was that he wanted to get the wrestling team to join the wrestling team at Chuo University. The story was always that they turned him down. And actually, in the biography, Makoto Kamada, one of his teammates, says, no, we wanted him. The basketball team just didn't let him transfer because it would have reflected badly on them. So Jumbo, I feel like I've gone way into his college life. Are you okay with this?
No, it's fine. Just I'll let you know when I want to jump in.
So he was, let me get to the right page. He chose to switch to individual sports. Like I said, he couldn't get onto the wrestling team. But he read an article, and he read an article about the team in Mexico City, and he realized, half of these guys train with the JSDF. I'm not going to join the military, but maybe I can go to he was already doing wrestling as his elective in school, but he's thinking, what if I start training with those guys? He goes to their physical education school, the military's education school, and he enrolls in a course and he realizes, wait, this is a civvy course. I want the real deal. So he goes to this coach, the actual team coach, and he says, hey, can you train me? And the guy says, no, but I'm going to give you a training regimen. If you stick to this, it'll come back in 3 months and we can start wrestling. And he did. So that's, let me find in, his upper body still needed work, but he was training, I think he was training like 3 times a week at this YMCA, just in Tokyo, or I think it was, in November of 1970, this guy, he enters a national competition as an unaffiliated member of this club. He places 3rd in Greco-Roman.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, you could just go back a bit, but like he attends Chuo University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in Japan, even to this day. And then he did, like, and you're saying like he participates in amateur wrestling as a goal to like, oh, I want to try to get into the Olympics, but in wrestling instead of in basketball.
Right. And he's probably thinking at this point about how he can promote himself as a pro wrestler. We'll get to that a little later. And fun fact, Chuo University, the first wrestling, Japan's first wrestling gold medalist, Shohachi Ishii, was a Chuo alum. He went there, he won at Helsinki in 52. So it's a great place to choose. It's just a shame that they're not letting him into the club.
It's interesting, like that the basketball team won't let him leave. But I mean, it's because
they'll let him leave.
But he's like, they want him. They want to keep him, right?
Right. And it would reflect. They'd rather have him not do anything at all than reflect badly on them by transferring.
That's very Japanese, by the way.
Everyone. Oh yeah.
But the thing is like Jumbo's actually a pretty tall guy. For your average height for a Japanese person is like under 6 feet,
right?
But he's like he's legit about 6 feet 3 inches. That's what he's billed at.
He was billed as like 6'6". The Olympic measurement was around 6'5". I trust the Olympic measurement more than the build weight. I'm guessing he's in the upper 6'4" to 6'5".
So he's pretty tall.
Very tall, yeah.
And then like his build weight was about like in wrestling was 130 kilograms, which would be like, I don't know, 290 pounds. Like,
that's late.
I think that's not legit. I don't think that's legit.
And that was also his late career. He was thinner. He was like 250, 240, 250-ish when he debuted. So anyway, in 71, he wins. He gets eliminated in the first round of one championship. Then he wins both Greco-Roman and freestyle at another championship. Because of this, he goes to the world championship in Bulgaria. He doesn't win anything, but that's still a big deal. And by the time he gets to his senior year, that's in 72, Chuo wants him. They bring him in. So he does that. Let me see. He goes to the All Japan Championships again, and he goes to a draw with one of the Yorihide Izogai, who, one of the interesting things about Jumbo's amateur wrestling career is that Izogai was the guy that he could never beat. And the reason, arguably, why Jumbo got as far as he did is that Izogai was out in 71 for hepatitis. Izogai was the first Japanese to compete in the wrestling team at the Olympics while he was still in high school. So this is this guy that Jumbo kind of lucked past, but both of them ended up going to Munich in the Olympics. I would say with Jumbo's career, he's kind of the person I would compare him to is Kurt Angle, and the sense that Kurt Angle, even by his own admission, was not the most technically skilled wrestler. What he was the best conditioned. The way that Kurt won the gold medal with a broken freaking neck is if you actually read about it, he dragged out that gold medal match. And that's kind of similar to what Jumbo was. He didn't necessarily have the skill to be the gold medalist, but he had such a great body and he worked so hard to get as far as he did. And it was a great foundation for pro wrestling. Let's put it that way.
For sure. And because of his success in amateur wrestling, he represents Japan in the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich. He doesn't win anything, But
Right.
hey, he represented. He was on the Japanese team for the Olympics.
And
So
in his senior year, he was practicing suplexes on the juniors. He
well, there you
already
go.
knew what he was going to be doing.
Well, it's perfect practice for like when he's gonna train the young boys in the dojo.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So there's a lot of interest in him from professional
Yeah.
wrestling companies at the time.
There
Like
is actually there is actually a little interest in sumo as well. Fun fact. There were a couple
like
sumo.
besides All Japan, like New Japan was interested in him, I imagine, right?
Actually not. Well, New Japan could not afford Jumbo. New Japan at this point they don't even have TV yet. They are swimming in debt. So this is, Rome had its year of the four emperors. 1972 was Japan's year of the four wrestling promotions. That is the year that All Japan and New Japan started, but you have the old JWA, Nipro, and you also have Kokusai, who is the IWE. What happens is Nipro really wanted Jumbo. They brought him to. This is how he actually gets into All Japan. They invited him to a show, a JWA show at Korakuen Hall. But while Jumbo was at Korakuen Hall, he met Satoshi Morioka, who was a big magazine guy. He was basically Baba's fixer. So Morioka is probably the guy who goes in his ear and says, "Hey, you want to come join All Japan? Because All Japan is just starting up." There's a guy, Ichiro Hata, who is basically the father of amateur wrestling in Japan. He was very he did a deal with Baba probably where they wanted Jumbo to represent amateur wrestling by going professional. And on October 31st, 1972, Jumbo he has a press conference with Baba, and he says, I have found employment at All Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, I'm specifying that because that's going to come back to bite Jumbo. Jumbo does not think like a Japanese pro wrestler usually does. It's a very sumo influenced culture. Somebody he would have said, "Oh, I've taken an apprenticeship or I've been initiated." But no, he says, "I found employment." And that is actually something that's going to bite Jumbo later on. A lot of people are going to look back on that and think, "Oh, he was a career guy." I'll talk about that a little later, about how Jumbo kind of had a trouble getting over with Japan's core audience. So
yeah, so he joins All Japan and he starts training.
He starts training. While he finishes his baccalaureate, he starts training with Masao Koma, who was All Japan's original head coach. They teach him how to run the ropes. They teach him how to bump. He's doing that, and then he goes for when he graduates, just like 10 days later, he takes a flight to LA, and from LA to Amarillo.
There you go, and he is sent on his, what we call now excursion. Mm-hmm. He's sent to Amarillo, Texas, to go under the wing of the Funk brothers, Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, and he's gonna be trained by them, primarily by Dory Funk Jr. Right. And be like, and they're gonna book him across the United States in the NWA territories. He would be billed as Tommy Tsuruta. He would be pushed as, oddly enough, because most foreign wrestlers would be billed as heels in most of the territories, especially if you're Japanese. But he was actually booked as, in a lot of territories, as a babyface, and he got over as a babyface. He worked Detroit, he worked St. Louis, Florida, and of course, West Texas territories. And like Dory Funk Jr. would call him the greatest student he ever trained. He would say like he was probably one of the best baby faces he had working with him at that time. And so both him and Terry Funk would go on to say, "Hey, we saw so much potential in this guy. We knew when he got back to Japan, he would become a superstar over there." What would you say were like some of like the other highlights of his career and his time in the United States?
Well, I will say with this first what we need to talk about is that this first excursion ended up being shorter than was originally planned. This is where I have to give some background on. I'm going to do this as quickly as I can. So basically, about 8 weeks. So 8 weeks after Jumbo's debut, he gets a title shot against Dory Funk Jr. Right when Jumbo came in, Dory separated his shoulder. He was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion at this point. He separated his shoulder, falling off his tractor. He was set to drop the title to Harley Race. They book him against Jumbo just 8 weeks after he's debuted to give Jumbo his first title shot. we need to talk about the fact that Baba, after he sent Jumbo to America, something politically happened where he needed Jumbo ready by October. So basically, the JWA was on its last legs in late 72, and they almost merged with New Japan to basically create a new JWA. This is why Sakaguchi and his guys ended up going to New Japan. But what happened was Kentaro Oki rallied everyone to go against this merger. And that was really, really bad for Baba, because Baba did not want all these other wrestlers to join All Japan and mess up his plans. But Baba had to answer to All Japan's board of directors, and they signed Kentaro Oki, Uminosuke Ueda, and 7 other guys who were going to mess up all of his plans for the hierarchy of All Japan. So back to Jumbo, Baba says, I need this guy ready by October. And apparently it's Terry's idea to give Jumbo that title match. So we need to talk about how this is really setting Jumbo up, not just as a top prospect like Sakaguchi had been, but as a prodigy, as the next Inoki even. And that's another highlight is during this the 5 months he spends in Amarillo, he wrestles a lot. He meets Stan Hansen, wrestles a lot with him. One night they're wrestling, I think it's like in Albuquerque, and they both try to leapfrog each other, chip part of each other's teeth off. You can actually see the little chip on Jumbo's front tooth.
So for those of you watching on YouTube, but only listening on podcasts, Cameron is kindly like providing us pictures from his collection of pictures.
Yeah,
you see a picture of Jumbo chipping with his chipped tooth there. So go over to YouTube, everyone. Postwrestling.com YouTube channel. But he gets over so he comes back when about in 70.
September. Well, his first match is October 6th, 1973. That first match in Japan against Moose Morosky. Just 3 days later, he teams with Baba against the Funks to challenge for the NWA International Tag Team titles, the same titles that Baba and Inoki had held in the JWA.
So with the booking, it's very clear this is Baba's successor. This is the guy we're gonna push.
Or if not Baba's successor, at least his new Inoki. When I say his new, so the basic thing, the way that a Baba Inoki match, a BI Gun match worked, is that Inoki was the work rate half. He was the one, to use a baseball metaphor, he was the one who would load the bases. Baba would hit the home run, and then Inoki would run the bases and get the finish and bring everything home. That was the job that Jumbo was given. And he does that job about as well as you could ask him to. But there are interesting thing with Jumbo. He comes in, they do this big contest to call him Jumbo Tsuruta. They have a fan name. Although if you read the magazines, Takashi Yamada was calling him Jumbo all that year. So I actually believe that Jumbo was always planned to be his nickname, and they just did the fan poll for fan engagement because you can market that.
Yeah, so the reason why he's not Tomomi Tsuruta is because in Japan, like, Tomomi is actually like kind of like a name common for women, and this, it's a patriarchal society. Yeah. It's wrestling, so they thought, we want to give him a kind of more, quote unquote macho name.
He wanted to be called Sil in high school. He'd get mad when people would call him Tomomi to get under his skin.
Right. So, like this, and it works. Jumbo's a great name for him.
This was when Jumbo Jets were just starting to go. There was a golfer around that time. I forgot his Jumbo Hori or something. I forgot his name.
But it goes towards like his height. It's like he's a tall man, so it's
giant Jumbo.
Giant instead of Giant Tsuruta. That would have been a terrible name. Jumbo works really.
I'm saying that it builds off of Giant because of Baba.
Sure, of course.
Apparently, Tiger Tsuruta and Hurricane Tsuruta and Iron Tsuruta were a few other candidates.
Thankfully they did not go with those. No. But so he's given the push in his right away from his return in 73. By 75 to 76, he's he's booked in a series of like special challenge matches
The trial series. So
the trial series, yeah.
First, we should say he won him and Baba finally won the big tag titles against the Funks in early 75. They wanted to do the match in Amarillo, but Nippon Television said, no, Baba and Jumbo are going to get booed in Amarillo. You better book it in San Antonio.
Right. So they do that big title match, and then he does the trial series. Who are the people he faces in these trial series?
So the trial series starts in March of 76. So he has Vern Gagne, the AWA champion, Rusher Kimura, the ace of rival promotion, Kokusai Pro Wrest, the IWE. Then he does, oh God, I think number three, was number three?
There's Billy Robinson in there.
Billy Robinson, I think, is 4. Terry Funk is 3. He has that big, great match against Terry Funk in 76. And people listening, if you watch 170's Jumbo match, watch that one. It is the classic. Then Robinson. And the funny thing with Robinson is that he had just had his big draw with Inoki the year before. They went 60 minutes. So him and Jumbo go 60 minutes, and then they go 5 more minutes. So Jumbo just went 65 minutes. Very funny politics here. They also does a match with Bobo Brazil, big legend in Japan in the 60s. He does Abdullah the Butcher. Then he does, let me see, 76. Sorry, just about. Oh, right. He does Chris Taylor, who he didn't wrestle him, but Chris Taylor was another person in his division in the Munich Olympics. He actually beat him with a missile drop kick from the top rope. That's a move he got from Ricky Gibson, Robert Gibson's older brother. He did a couple. The trial series is also, he has a big match with NWA title match with Harley Race that June, a match with Kentaro Oki in July of 77. But then the trial series gets put on hold until the beginning of 1979. The reason for that, I just learned from a Fucci book. They wanted it to end with Bruno, but Bruno, after the Stan Hansen neck injury, just didn't have the juice for a Japanese tour. So they ended up putting that off for 18 months. They have this Jumbo instead has this classic match with Mil Mascaras, the Idol Showdown. Stay tuned for the end of the episode. I'll have something on that.
Okay. So it's like a, murderer's row of names you just listed there. And so how many people did he actually beat in this trial series? I think he beat 4 of them. He went to draws with 2, and then he lost against 4 of them, or something like that. I think it was something like that. Yeah. And he did end up facing Bruno Sammartino.
No, they did. Bruno came in. They ended up finishing it against Fritz von Erich. Bruno worked one last little tour in 81. That was it.
Yeah. So Fritz von Erich. So Jumbo got a match with Fritz von Erich in this trial series. So again, still a murderer's row of
another
names.
Thing on the tag end that I want to mention is that they did. They had a big tag feud with Kentaro Oki and Kim Duck, a Korean team. And the match that they had in Seoul in October of 77, according to historian Matt Farmer, is the highest rated television match in history. Not necessarily the most highly viewed, but in terms of TV ratings, that is the one. So Jumbo is a part of history there. It's a shame we just don't have any of that Korean footage.
No, who knows? Maybe in the future, but whatever.
Yeah,
he would win his first singles title, which would be the United National title,
an old title of Inoki's in the JWA, just for people to know.
On August 28th, 1976, from Jack Briscoe.
Yes,
in Tokyo. So it's pretty cool. Like a legend in Japan. And of course in America, Jack Briscoe. So that's, it's very, I feel it's like some of these wins are very calculated, right? It's like, hey, he beats Jack Briscoe, the guy who's got matches against.
And Briscoe had a all-time classic match against Inoki back in 71. So,
and then in 1980, he would win his first of 2 champion carnivals. He defeated Dick Slater in the finals of that tournament. And that's the interesting thing about that win is that before him, there were 7 other champion carnivals. And only 2 people ever won those. That was being Giant Baba and Abdul the Butcher. So he's the first guy outside of those 2 to win the championship.
Jumbo did reach the finals twice. In 77, he went to the finals against Giant Baba. That was actually Jumbo's, besides the Ricky Dozan Memorial Show, that was All Japan's first show in the Budokan. in 77. It was their only one for 8 years. He won that, he lost that. And then in 79, he lost against Abdullah the Butcher again. So he was in the top running. It just took until 1980 for him to win. And I will say, even by that point, I planted seeds for this. Jumbo has a weird reputation in this era. So the thing is, women love Jumbo, and he's unprecedented in that regard. Jumbo is really the first sign of the demographic shift that was going to come after the Showa period, where Fujinami kind of picks up where he left off right after that. But Jumbo was really popular with girls, and that he would call him an idol wrestler. But the cost of that was Jumbo was not mercenary. He wasn't like a Kevin Nash sort of figure, but he was always very upfront about the fact that wrestling, as much as he loved it, was his job. He was very realistic about it. He was, Choshu would later, you call him as an insult, a salaryman wrestler. And that just speaks to, Jumbo, as much as we love him, for the target audience, he was kind of hard to connect to, because he was hard to, you couldn't really live vicariously through a guy who was so much like you, Inoki has this whole macho samurai attitude, and Tenryu would also have that later on, but Jumbo didn't really give them that. And that's an interesting thing of Jumbo's career. So with Dick Slater, this guy who is, to paraphrase The Simpsons, everybody kind of saw him as Terry Funk's non-union Floridian equivalent. I think it was Akio Sato, as somebody who we're going to talk about in just a bit, was somebody who noticed, that Jumbo was not given, they didn't really pull the trigger on Jumbo. He was the number 2 guy, but where I'm going to take my blazer off, where Fujinami and Choshu would always talk about, our goals are to suppress Inoki. Jumbo would never say that about Baba. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Yeah. So like the thing is he's
in my shoulder.
He's like, Baba is his president, right? The president of the company, and he's like his star employee, and he's like, oh, I don't want to be president. I just want to be the star employee. And so there you go. Like he doesn't have like the kind of the like you say, the mercenary attitude, or kind of like the ruthlessness you kind of need to be a successful professional wrestler.
For people don't know, the way that Inoki got himself over is he went into business for himself and called a press conference challenging Baba, doing the John Cena, I think there should be only one world championship. Inoki did that. And Jumbo was never going to, we should actually double back a little bit. There is a bit of All Japan lore that was not known for 30 years, but which is really important to this story. So there was another guy in All Japan named Samson Kutsuwada. And we don't know exactly what he tried to do, but it was some sort of mutiny against Baba. And Jumbo was kind of involved. He wasn't an active conspirator, but he was talking with, he was listening to Kutsuwada, who had these things about, he had connections, and he wanted to create some other promotion. At the end of 77, Baba calls in Jumbo and Kutsuwada, fires Kutsuwada. And Tenryu has said that when I first met Jumbo, he had some critiques about how things were done. He kind of wanted to run things differently, but after this happened, Baba did not fire Jumbo. Jumbo was too big a star, but he did isolate him from the rest of the locker room. And it's been commonly, what seems to have happened is that Jumbo just, he kind of shut that part of himself down. He said, I'm going to protect my job. I'm going to be the great wrestler, but that's kind of it. That's a really important part of this story too.
So we want to talk a bit about like kind of the evolution of Jumbo Tsuruta's wrestling style. So, he's trained by the Funks. He works in All Japan, which is an NWA territory.
Right.
So he works a very NWA style.
You watch old All Japan, it kind of feels like you're watching a colony of the NWA.
Yeah, so it's a methodical style. There's not too much, high spots. It builds a story, and I mean this serves him well later on in his career, because he's for a lot of people, he's one of the greatest storyteller wrestlers. Like he builds upon in his match from the opening to the end, but also the next match he'll have with somebody, if it's the same person, he builds upon that. And this is like kind of the start of what we call King's Road, is like the kind of the continuity of storytelling, of like elements of like, oh, this move happened, so it's not going to happen. The next one is going to be blocked, so on and so forth. But there's a point where now we're into the 80s, and in New Japan, there's like a faster pace style going on, pioneered by, of course, like, the junior heavyweights, but also by Riki Choshu, Tatsumi Fujinami. And a key thing that happens in Japanese wrestling, and particularly for All Japan, is that Riki Choshu decides to leave New Japan Pro Wrestling, takes a bunch of guys, and he joins All Japan Pro Wrestling, and he brings this style over with him. And then now Jumbo is like facing a guy that works a faster pace than him, and him and Genichiro Tenryu are like, okay, what's this? And then they maybe I've read that they initially had a bit of trouble adapting to the style of, like, say, Choshu and Yoshiaki Yatsu, who is his tag team partner at the time, but they quickly caught on to it, and they thought, okay. And so now we get to this period where you're seeing this shift in Jumbo and Tenryu's style from the 70s into like this kind of New Japan style that's a faster pace. And then this is the evolution of Jumbo in the 80s.
That's a little, we got to talk about the early 80s. We got to talk about Jumbo's AWA champion first. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but I do want to say Choshu, the best quote, the best wrestling diss I have ever heard is when Choshu was asked for commentary or to compare New Japan to All Japan. He said, "We rock, they waltz."
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's perfect. The more you think about it, the more perfect it is. So let's talk about, I think it's time for us to talk about the early 80s. There is a big shakeup in All Japan that I'm going to actually take this to full screen. There is a big shakeup in All Japan in the early 80s. The network takes over. And this is actually fairly public knowledge even at the time.
So by the network, you mean Nippon Television, right?
Yes, NTV. It's in the middle of so we need to talk. So All Japan lost primetime TV in the spring of 79. They were knocked back to 5:30. In the early 80s, New Japan is on fire. And it's really and NTV is looking at All Japan, and what they don't like is that the most over guys are the foreigners. Terry Funk is the biggest wrestler in this Japanese company. That's, to them, from the network's perspective, they are paying All Japan to produce 1 hour of content every week. That's 1 to 4 matches per TV show. If you're doing that, why are you hiring? Because there's a big wage gap between native and foreign wrestlers. Why are you hiring 10 foreign wrestlers for a tour when you're only doing that much content a week? To them, they see this as not healthy at all. They actually, first of all, they want things to return to how it was with Ricky Dozon, and really how it was at that point in New Japan, where the Japanese guys are the top stars. They're the ones beating the foreigners. They wanted that. This is a very shocking thing to hear now, and in hindsight, they wanted Baba to retire. They wanted him to go to a 3-year plan where after 84 he doesn't wrestle anymore. There's even an interview with Mitsuo Matsune, who is the guy who becomes president of All Japan, where it's like, I don't mind if Baba works house shows, but he needs to stick to being a manager. Now Baba, that's a story for another time, how Baba kind of revitalizes himself, but it's kind of because of the network that Jumbo becomes the ace. We talk a lot about how Jumbo was always meant to be the successor to Baba, but the evidence doesn't quite lay that out. I think it was Baba and Jumbo. That's the way he was thinking. So the network brings in Akio Sato as a booker. Now, Sato does not work unilaterally. He is still having to butt heads with Baba a lot with this stuff to get stuff done. He's in Sato. You can tell in the interviews that I've translated, he does have a bit of sourness towards Baba, but he makes a lot of very salient points that really throw the frustrating parts of early 80s All Japan into context. He was the one so we should say in June of 82, they really June of 82, Jumbo has a big match against Ric Flair. He switches to black trunks because that's what Ricky Dozon wore. And he starts using the Greco-Roman backdrop and the Thez press as finishes because New Japan had been marketing itself as successors to Karl Gotch. Nippon Television has the idea, why don't we market ourselves as successors to Lou Thez? This is also why Tenryu starts using the power bomb. They had there was actually a plan at one point in the Real World Tag League to have Gotch and Thez team up. Fun fact. They did. So we go through this, and I think this really kind of culminates in 84, where Jumbo has had so many NWA title shots and he's never going to win that title. He does not, Baba was able to pay money to win the NWA title 3 times so he could look good against Inoki, but Jumbo just doesn't have that pull. So what they did, for early 84, Vern Gagne wanted to have Nick Bockwinkel drop the belt to Giant Baba as a transition to Rick Martel. Apparently, Sato and Matsune were the ones who put their foot down and said, no, Jumbo is the one who is going to win this match. They forced Baba's hand. And it was on February 23rd, 1984, Jumbo finally wins his big match. They put it on primetime for the first time in years. He draws a 14.9% rating, and he gets that 3-month title reign, that started it all for you when you first learned about Jumbo. So that's how the sausage was made there.
Yeah, so it's if you like excuse me, if you like kind of 80s AWA styles, it's a good match. I like the match with Bockwinkel.
Yeah.
It's a fun match because Terry Funk is the special guest referee for it, and he's wearing a tuxedo, which is hilarious.
Yeah, my favorite is
referee tuxedo. I'm talking he's wearing a full tuxedo.
Oh, I mean, Joe Higuchi's referee, he looks like a mechanic in that old Joe Higuchi suit. I will say my favorite Bockwinkel match is the one in Hawaii in 79.
So, and it's a big moment because he's won one of the big 3, right? Yes. So, he's won, of course, at the time, NWA, WWF, and WWF at the time, and then the AWA World Title. He holds it for 3 months, and then the decision is, okay, we're going to go, Vern Gagne thinks, okay, Martel's going to be my guy who's going to help me curtail this, Vince's national expansion in 84, in the early 80s, and compete with Crockett over in the NWA. And so, they do the match with Martel. And I mean, I've read, Martel, just praise Jumbo, what a great worker he was and how much fun he had working with him.
They have the title drop match is good. They have a couple of really good matches after. I mean, it's hilarious because Rick Martel, he comes out in All Japan to Let's Hear It for the Boy, but there's a great match or two there they have afterward.
So there's a lot of great music in All Japan. What do you mean? That's hilarious. That's great. I think that's great. They, we get they use all kinds of Danger Zone is,
they had Danger Zone and Footloose, but they never had anyone come out to I'm All Right. You got to complete that Kenny Loggins trilogy.
Sure. Maybe that was going to be Jun Nakayama's, theme song at one point.
Maybe Tarzan Goto's. Maybe
Tarzan or Samson Fuyuki before he jumped ship with Tenryu to SWS. So, the 80s happen, him and Henry, they're bringing in people, NWA, AWA people, but the Road Warriors are coming in.
The Road Warriors.
And let's talk about Tenryu teaming with Jumbo, because it's basically the formula, you have in most Japanese wrestling companies, starting with Baba and Noki. They team, they're partners, they become rivals, and we have that in you have that in All Japan, you have that with Tenryu Tsuruta, then becomes Misawa Kawada, Misawa Kobashi, so forth, so on. Let's talk about the relationship between these two guys who are synonymous with All Japan in the 80s, and that's Jumbo Tsuruta and Genichiro Tenryu.
They have they are two very different. They were two very different people. They were friends, especially in the early years. There are great stories about Tenryu taking Elvis to see, taking Jumbo to see an Elvis show in Amarillo the year Elvis died. So but funny, there's another great story where Tenryu had come in, but he hadn't debuted yet, and he was wearing his robe. And Jumbo comes in all sweaty and just pats him in on this, this fancy robe. Just he gets chewed out for it. So Jumbo's kind of they come from different worlds, and Tenryu is somebody who's kind of he struggles to grow in Jumbo's shadow. But there's also there's a difference between the two that I think is really worth elucidating on, and I want to use a story about the Road Warriors to kind of tell this. So the Road Warriors in '85 got really big because they were on a Saturday morning show from TV Tokyo that was licensing footage, and All Japan won the bidding war to get them into All Japan. So they come in. And I couldn't find it today, but I know there's a shoot interview clip out there where Road Warrior Animal has talked about Hawk chewing Jumbo out for blowing their spots behind the scene in the locker room and saying, you're gonna do our match right. Compare that to Tenryu, who when Tenryu learned that the Road Warriors were coming in, he went to Tadao Manma, the color commentator for Sakai no Progress, and he said, "Hey, can you do me a tape of the Road Warriors?" And Monma said, "I'll do it for a bottle of scotch." So there is sort of, and this difference where Jumbo kind of does, Tenryu kind of goes the extra mile with a lot of stuff, and he spent a lot more time in America than Jumbo did. He had to fend for himself a lot more. And that's why there's a really interesting contrast there. Eventually, and it's Tenyu's frustrations with Jumbo are part of why he eventually leaves, and we'll get to that later. But they do have a great tag team. They start to they really start pushing that. It was '83. They enter the World Tag League together. And then '84, they're really putting the pieces together. And yeah, that's that. So then it's time to talk about Choshu.
Yeah, Choshu invades Yoshiaki Yatsu, who else? Killer Khan, the British Bulldogs. He brings a ton of people with him to All Japan, and yeah, let's talk about Choshu. The importance of Choshu to Jumbo's career in All Japan.
Yeah, Choshu. Now Choshu was also an amateur. They never wrestled each other. I think they were in slight. He was. There was one time that they might have, but it just never happened. Choshu was actually brought in by New Japan as I should note, New Japan did actually try to get Jumbo a couple times in the mid and late 70s. Hisashi Shinma really wanted him, but it never went anywhere. And that's why they brought in Yoshiaki Yatsu. It was basically Shinma saying, "I'm going to make my own Jumbo." That was because Yatsu was an Olympian as well. Anyway, with Choshu, Choshu is somebody who appeals to that hardcore fan that, like I said earlier, Jumbo kind of has trouble with. There's an interview where he calls Jumbo a salaryman wrestler. And they start, and there's sort of, and the thing, it's worth noting, Tenryu has 3 great singles matches with Choshu in this era. Jumbo only has this 1 60-minute draw, and it is not a career highlight. And I don't bring this up to diss Jumbo. It's to say that he's kind of this is a weird period for Jumbo personally as well. I think it's time to get into that. People listening to this career know that Jumbo's career ended because of hepatitis. This is where he found out that he had hepatitis. They were going to do the Jumbo Choshu match in August, but they put it off. They wrote him off with they did a worked knee injury where Killer Khan did his knee drop. So he goes in to treat a nerve in his right arm, and he does blood work, and he finds out he has hepatitis B in the summer of '85. He only tells Baba and Motoko. It is kept a secret from the rest until it goes out. But that is something that's hanging over Jumbo at this point. In '86, he starts taking medicine, but he knows it's only a matter of time. And that's something that is certainly that's starting on his head while he's working with Choshu and stuff. And, then I guess we can talk about in '86. Basically, Choshu's guys were part of this company called Japan Pro Wrestling. The original idea was that they were a satellite organization to All Japan while they were getting their own network deal together. They wanted to basically be what War kind of became in the 90s, where they would do a program with one company and then finish and then do a program with another. Japan Pro wanted to do that, and they had their own deal with Fuji TV. That fell through, so then they signed All Japan. That's why they start doing clean finishes in 86.
Right. So it's a really interesting time historically. But we sorry, just losing my train of thought here. Hold on a sec. I just got to take care of something.
I can't hear you.
Talk more about the kind of the shift with like what does Choshu bring to
Choshu brings energy, an energy that Jumbo, for a long time, he's been very it's just me right now, but he's been very because Jumbo spent his career working against American guys, sort of letting American guys set the pace. Choshu turns the speed way up. He brings a lot of intensity that and Jumbo adapts to this, I think, very well. But it's not, and there's sort of this divide where Jumbo is still kind of, I think when I talk about that match with Choshu, there's an interview Tenryu did where he said, I thought Jumbo was trying to make himself look big in that match, but I thought it made him look small. There's I'm really dehydrated.
Okay, so we'll talk get rehydrated there, Cameron.
I'm sorry, dude.
No, it's okay. So we'll talk about this. So this is the start, I feel like, of the groundwork, laying the groundwork for the King's Road style. So this is Choshu comes in, they say, okay, we gotta work, this faster paced style, and it's go to clean finishes. This is the groundwork for the 90s King's Road with the 4 pillars, with later on Steve Williams, Terry Gordy. But of course, the foundation is Jumbo, Tenryu, and then with Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody, this is where they're okay, let's try to create the style that people would love in the 90s. So with that, also, Baba decides, or maybe someone else decides, maybe Cameron's going to tell us who decided, we're going to create the Triple Crown Championship.
The Triple Crown was an idea that had already, that, as far as I know, that was Baba's idea. The stuff that you're kind of alluding to, that I tipped you off about, that happens a little bit late. Well, okay, they start to tease the Triple Crown, and that's when have we gotten into Choshu went back, and then there's this feud with Tenryu has started. Okay, so and this is something that Tenryu actually went to Baba and said. Apparently he went to Baba and said, I want to break up with Jumbo and start feuding with him. I want to do what Choshu did in New Japan for us. There's a great interview quote where he says, Jumbo is a wet loofah. I'm gonna squeeze him tight.
Right. So that's a big part of the success of All Japan is the rivalry of Tenryu and Jumbo. So one of the things you can put towards Jumbo is he is the first ever Triple Crown champion. He was the NWA International Champion at the time. He defeated Stan Hansen, who held the PWF heavyweight title and the NWA United National Championship, and this happens on April 18th, 1989. So these 3 titles, these 3 major singles titles, are now formed into one title, which would be called the Triple Crown. But the other first that he did was he was also one half of the first ever, All Japan World Tag Team Champions, uniting the NWA International Tag Team titles with the PWF Tag Team titles. So and just for people who don't know, the PWF is the governing body of of All Japan. It's their version of the IWGP. So
basically,
it's also they're holding over from their relationship with the NWA with a lot of these titles as well.
When Baba joined Baba had Ricky Dozon's old title when he started, and he was saying it was a world title. When he joined the NWA, they made him form the PWF and say it was the PWF title and not the world title. That's where that comes from. So James Blears, that British guy from Hawaii, is the chairman of the PWF.
So so it's the Olympics, which is the tag team of Jumbo with
And
Yoshiaki
Yatsu.
Yatsu. They're the first ever world tag team champions. So like, basically it's symbolic, but it makes sense. Like Jumbo is the guy who ushers in this new era with like these unified titles. Okay, now titles mean more because outside of those, you have the PWF World Junior Heavyweight title and the All Asia Tag Team titles, which he keeps. And so like, and I'm a big proponent of less titles is better. So, and this is a great era. Not like now. Every fucking company has too many titles in America, in Japan. It's ridiculous. But this is like a golden era because you have 2 sets of tag team titles, not 4 or 5. And you have 2 sets of single titles, 1 heavyweight title and 1 junior heavyweight title, and that's great.
Yeah, and the All Asia tag titles was distinguished because they had those were kind of like the tag team equivalent of an intercontinental title. There was they had their distinct role on the card. Like definitely the All Asia stuff had a reason to exist. So what we need to talk about with the late 80s is something that's happening behind the scenes. UWF comes back, and the UWF, the first UWF wasn't that successful, but its mystique grew, its legend grew. And when it came back, it got over, as it worked people into believing that it was legitimate fights, and it created a demand for clean finishes. Now, after it was in the summer of 1988 that Baba started having secret creative meetings with Takashi Yamamoto, or Tarzan Yamamoto, and another reporter by the name of Hidetoshi Ichinose. These were guys from Weekly Pro Wrestling magazine, and they are very important in this story. They are the ones, they swear up and down, and I believe them, that they are the ones who said that Baba, they became sort of creative consultants. They weren't booking the matches themselves, but in exchange for good press and Weekly Pro, they did have some input. They helped Baba develop a new marketing slogan called Akaruku Tanoshku Hageshku, which is bright, fun, and intense. So bright meaning clean finishes, fun meaning, not too rough. That's not a good translation, but it means like you're not going to have like bloodbaths. It's something that you can show to the kids, but it's also something, it can be family entertainment, but it's also intense. It's also violent. And you see that actually in the summer of '88, it was Tarzan's idea for them to hold a fan poll about what match they wanted to headline the Budokan. The match that they wanted, the tag match, was Jumbo and Bruiser Brody versus Tenryu and Stan Hansen. Unfortunately, Brody was murdered in Puerto Rico as that tour started. The show was retooled into a tribute show, and the Tenryu Hansen team did become a thing in '89, but that was starting to lay the groundwork for what we now think of as King's Road. They started really putting over Kobashi in their write-ups. They started really. This is really the secret. This is really where the myth of King's Road starts to build up. Tarzan says, you guys really need to make your Korakuen show special. You need to target the cosmopolitan market. That's where the legend of Korakuen Hall comes from. These big house shows with no TV where you're still having incredible matches, still having novel matches like Baba and Kobashi having a title match against Footloose for the All Asia and stuff like that. This is kind of getting away from Jumbo, but this is the context that Jumbo is in. This is what is building for King's Road, and this is kind of what is going to part of what's going to drive Tenryu away.
So talking about Tenryu before he leaves,
right?
Jumbo wins the Triple Crown. He's the first ever Triple Crown champion. He loses the title to Tenryu on June 5th, and
one of the greatest matches of all time.
One of the great matches. Like we've reviewed that match. It's an awesome match. He regains the belt from Tenryu on October 11th of the same year. In what is it again? Sorry, 1989. Mm-hmm. Then he would lose the belt to Terry Gordy on June 5th, a year later after he lost the title the first time. And then he holds the Triple Crown one more time. He wins it from Stan Hansen on January 19th, 1991, and would hold it. This is, I think, his longest reign. He holds it for about a year until dropping the Triple Crown back to Hansen on January 28th, 1992, because I believe Baba doesn't want to pull the trigger on Masao winning the Triple Crown. Masao's beaten Jumbo, but he hasn't beaten him for the Triple Crown yet. And I think he wanted to save that for a big show. Yeah. But unfortunately, things take a turn with Jumbo's health. But, Stan Hansen is a guy that, really fulfilled the role that Jumbo started with the 4 pillars.
That is explicitly when this is skipping ahead. When Jumbo when Jumbo couldn't do it anymore. That is something in the Japanese literature that they all but say that Hansen was booked in the position where Jumbo would have been. He was the wall that Misawa could get past, but it took Kobashi and Kawada longer. He was the he was the separator between Misawa and the other two.
Yeah, and because of Jumbo's hepatitis diagnosis, and it's really taking its toll on him in the 90s, that he it's okay. Baba goes to who else can I do? Well, Tenryu's left. It would have been Tenryu, I think, but he said I can trust Stan Hansen. He's not going to leave me, and he never does. So and he's the guy who has the most cachet outside of Jumbo in this company for these guys to get over. And by that I mean the 4 pillars. Yeah.
So related with hepatitis, so Tenryu has been he has been dissatisfied with All Japan for a long time. The stuff that leads that him leaving, there's a lot of stuff behind it, but the story that he tells is about the last straw. He felt that the Jumbo feud was getting really stale, and if they were going to do one more match, he wanted to make it. He wanted blood. He wanted a bloody match. Now Tenryu does not know that Jumbo has hepatitis. Neither does. So the way that these matches would work is they weren't necessary. So Kyohei Wada is the one who they would talk to relay messages about how the match was going to go. So Wada goes to Jumbo and tells him what Tenryu wants. And he says, I don't want to do a bloody match. Tell him to take it easy on me tonight. He didn't tell him what this was really about. He goes back to Tenryu and says, he told tell Genchen, it was like, tell Genchen to take it easy on me tonight. And he hears that. And Tenryu says, okay. And he goes to his friend, Kagehiro Osano, Gong reporter, and he says, if I lose this match, I quit. He drops a massive hint to his best friend in the press that he is going to leave to SWS, all because Jumbo didn't tell him about his hepatitis.
Right. And what do you think it would have been different if he was aware of why he didn't want to do a bloody match with Tenryu, because to protect his health and protect everyone else?
I think he would have understood. He even said he would have understood.
And he wouldn't have quit, you think, or he would have quit anyways?
I think he might have. I think he might. I feel like then you might have quit anyway, because there was just a lot of dissatisfaction there. He's kind of the I don't think there was too much going on for him not to take that offer.
No, I mean I think he would have left regardless. Tenryu is we're gonna do a biography in the future of Tenryu, and whoever my guest is for that we'll talk about it. But his leaving is really a good thing in disguise for All Japan, because it's the catalyst. Bob is like, okay, I got to push this next generation, and I got no choice because Tenryu's left. Jumbo's got hepatitis. He's gonna be winding down. I gotta push these guys, and he's lucky. He's got this crop of five guys plus Williams and Hansen and then he's got Akiyama in the wings. He's like, okay, I gotta do something with these guys. I don't know. I would say he jumpstarts their push, maybe 5 years ahead of what was originally going to happen with Tenryu stick around. So honestly, it's the best thing to happen to All Japan is Tenryu leaving. And honestly, it's the best thing for Tenryu because he goes to New Japan. He starts SWS. He starts War, does the stuff in FMW with Onita and Hayabusa and all these people. And then when the exodus happens with Noah, he comes back and he helps keep that company alive until Muto comes back.
Fact with that, he was apparently he had talked to Misawa right before Misawa left, and he was like, "Hey, I want to come back to All Japan." Apparently, Misawa said, "Just wait on that a little bit," because he was about to start Noah, because he thought Tenryu would go to Noah, but it was actually better for Tenryu to just go to All Japan by that point.
That's really interesting. Like, I mean, he does end up going to do some work in Noah, and it's great. And like the stuff you see him do with Misawa and Kobashi there is awesome.
Yeah.
So where am I in my own notes? So he's, we talk about Stan Hansen. He's the gatekeeper that the four pillars eventually have to overcome. But back to Jumbo. Jumbo is the bridge of the traditional style of All Japan from the 70s into this new style in the 80s, and then he's the guy who kind of bridges those eras with like the 90s, which is like like in all of wrestling, 90s is like this pioneering era that we still in 2024 we're still seeing the effects of, like, right? American indie wrestling in the 2000s is largely inspired by Japanese heavyweight wrestling, and particularly from New Japan, but also from the King's Road style of All Japan, because of all the, what are they doing in American Indies wrestling? Head drops. And then this permeates into mainstream American wrestling, which we see in AEW and even to an extent in the WWE. But he's that bridge, right? And he's now, his character is now, okay, I'm not the ace of the company anymore. That's Masao, but I'm the gate. I'm the wall still, while he's still healthy enough to work regularly. He's a seasoned and weathered veteran trying to hold on to his top side. He's what we call the grumpy veteran, right? Like he's
grumpy Jumbo.
Fuck you guys. You're not taking my spot. I'm still vital. I'm still viable. And, and that's awesome. He creates Tsuruta again. It originally has Yoshiaki Yatsu before he jumped ships to SWS with Tenryu.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because he brings in as his tag team partner, and one of my favorite tag team pairings is him and Akira Taue, who says, okay, Super Generation Army is going to be these guys, Misawa, Kawada, Kobashi, and Kikuchi. I don't have a role. I'm not going to get over in there. So he teams with.
It was actually Baba. Baba was the one who actually had Taue switch sides.
But it makes sense, right?
Yeah,
because it's like,
of course.
Jumbo needs like one of the younger guys to be on his side, and Taue makes perfect sense, because I always feel like, okay, Taue is like Jumbo sees himself in Taue because of their similar look and kind of style of wrestling, but he also has on his side the great Masanobu Fuchi, and then you have Super Generation Army versus Tsuruta Gun, and this kicks off really the style we all love, and that's what this show is based around, is like the start. What they started with Tsuruta Gun versus Super Generation Army.
I think we need to step back a little bit and talk about Misawa. What about?
Of course.
So let's talk. So apparently, Misawa spent much of '89 on injury, as a listener may know. He got hurt against Ricky Steamboat, and he comes back at the beginning of the year. Now, it does appear that he was going to take his mask off before Tenryu left. He actually there's some commentary in Weekly Pro in March of '90 where he said I'm going to take it off soon. So they're teasing it. But that the 6/8/90, the match that started, one of the most important matches in All Japan history, one of the most important matches of Jumbo's career, the first Jumbo match that I ever saw, the match that made me fall in love with wrestling after, thinking I didn't like it for half my life. That match was created during the tour. You might think that that Misawa unmasking was always going to that match. That's not what happened. If you look at the original tour schedule, there's the big 6-man tag where Misawa hits him with the elbow, knocks him out for 2 minutes. Guess what? Misawa wasn't in that match. It was Shunji Takano. Shunji Takano, for those listening, the guy who kicked Kawada's teeth out. So what happened, goes back to Tarzan and Ichinose. They swore to Baba up and down, but Misawa has to go over. And the Misawa is your best bet. You need this. And so there is the famous story on June 8th, 1990, that Baba went to him and said, and Baba finally just he saw all the merch with Misawa. He saw it all sold out, and he said, Jumbo, you're losing tonight. And Jumbo said, can we do a DQ or a count out? And Baba said no. So that's that.
Well, of course, legendary. It's like, that's
Yeah.
the kickstart of, the Super Generation Army. And yeah, of course. And that's a great detail. It's like, like things that we have kind of, aware of as kind of like as truth, is more kind of like mythology, because, wrestling is a work. And,
Yeah.
like people like to put stuff, out there that's maybe not necessarily 100% accurate. So, one of my final things about Jumbo as a wrestler, like he starts to wind down in the mid 90s. So he's basically, he knows about his hepatitis. When does he go official with it?
So just real quick, another thing I want to say is that we need to give credit to Fuchi. So it's a myth that Baba, we always talk about Baba's booking, that Baba had feedback. Baba had input, but it was feedback. Fuchi was the one in the 90s, Super Generation Army onward. Fuchi is the one who is actually putting the matches together. Fuchi is, and that is why things change. That's why those Misawa Kobashi matches in the late end of the decade, they were kind of against that. That's why that's why the late 90s All Japan 98, 99 is so different, because Misawa took over from Fuchi as basically the agent for a bunch of matches. So back to Jumbo. What happened? It's in the middle. You can tell with Jumbo, because once he still kept in shape, but he wasn't really, he didn't want to push things too far. So he stopped really working out after. You can kind of see his physique start to slim down in the late 80s into the early 90s. So it's before the summer tour of 92, his liver just goes haywire and he has to go to the hospital. They cover it up as an old ankle injury, but it's been years since something like this happened. So all of the press is kind of saying, like, they know something's up. It comes now, All Japan guys still don't know that he has hepatitis. They do know that he's having liver problems. They just don't know about the hep yet. So then Jumbo comes back for one last run. I think it's one or two. I think it's 2 tours in late 92. And then his liver again is just, it's going to kill the guy. So he just has just enough time to bring Akiyama debuted, and he works with him 3 times. He gets hospitalized for over 7 months. They have to bring Akiyama up to the World Tag League immediately, and it's kind of too early. I think it's in the summer of 93. One newspaper, I don't have it offhand, says that Jumbo has hepatitis and he's retiring. A day later, Jumbo makes his own comment that he does have hepatitis. Everything else in that is true, but he is not retiring. So Jumbo was allowed to return to the ring, but his doctor gave him very, very strict conditions. He could only work tag matches, 6-man tag matches, which is what it usually ended up being. He could never work to the point of exhaustion, and he could not take any strikes. Now I don't believe that the company knew explicitly about all these conditions. I have Fuchi's autobiography in 2022, Royal Road Blues, and he actually says that Baba did book Jumbo's matches in this period, so that they probably kept that part of it discreet. There is another really interesting story that dovetails into this. So the weekly Pro Wrestling Bridge of Dreams show, the show where All Japan steals the show with that big 6-man tag, which was, what was that? That was was it Misawa, Kobashi, and Hansen versus Kawada, Taue, and Johnny Ace. That was not the match that won the fan poll. The match that won the fan poll never got printed. The match that won was Misawa, Kobashi, and Baba versus Kawada, Taue, and Jumbo. This is something Ichinose said wrote in his book 20 years later, his book about the pillars. Baba would not tell Ichinose why they could not do this, why they couldn't put Jumbo in such a high-profile match, but he forced them to falsify the poll to switch Baba and Jumbo out with Hansen and Steve Williams. Then Steve Williams got busted at the airport, and they had to switch in Johnny Ace.
There you go. So, he's now moving down the card. He's wrestling sporadically, primarily in 6-man comedy matches, where he doesn't have to take any strikes or take any big bumps. And this is where he's now, going to the next phase of his life, which is in education. So he's teaching physical education at Keio University, Toei University, and his alma mater of Chuo University.
He was going back. He went back to. It was after. So he was thinking about this for a long time. Tsutomu Shimizu, who's a Gong reporter, has told a story that it as far back as 1990, he was like, it was before a show. I saw Jumbo on a park bench outside the stadium reading a book about management. And I said, Jumbo, what are you reading? He's like, I want to open a restaurant. So he was thinking about this early on, while he was still healthy. But he thought about getting back into education. He went back to school. He would take like 3-hour commutes to go to Tokyo to study. He would go during this time. According to Ichinose, Jumbo wanted to retire earlier than he did, but Baba wanted to keep him on as sort of a thing. And unfortunately, as the money situation in All Japan changed, some of the talent resented Jumbo for this. He would go to Korakuen Hall and visit, backstage. He would go there just to like take a shower, just to feel like one of the boys again. And it wasn't true, but there was a rumor at one point that All Japan had funded Jumbo going back to school. And some people, unfortunately saw him as a leech on their wages. This is a point in time where All Japan is like not putting money together they're not having great TV ratings. You'll notice in 97, there's some TV tapings where they don't buy good lights. Really, there's really bad lighting. There is sort of the stuff that's leading to the Noah exodus is happening. If that is something I want to put out, it is a myth that Baba and Misawa were always going to confront. Baba's death did not change anything. Motoko really was representing a irreconcilable difference that they were running to with that. That is something I want to, the whole myth that, a lot of times you'll hear people basically say that bitch Motoko had to ruin everything. No, that is not it. That is not it at all. She really was representing Baba's wishes.
So back to Jumbo.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's great. It's great information. Like Jumbo would do like wrestle sporadically until about September 11th, 1998, which would be his last match, teaming with Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura against Haruka Aigen, Masanobu Fuchi, and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi at Budokan Hall. He then announced his official retirement on February 20th, 1999, and had
just a month after Baba's death.
And he talks about this. If you see the clips on YouTube, he talks about he was thinking about delaying his departure to go to America to teach, but Baba told him like, just follow your dreams, don't worry about me.
He got a researcher's visa. He needed to go because it was going to be hard to get that again.
And he had his retirement ceremony on March 6th, 1999 at Budokan Hall, which you can see on YouTube, and it is subtitled there
by Yuji, his son, by Yuji
Tsuruta, who's a great follow on the Twitter. He would then move to America to start teaching at Portland State University as a research exchange professor. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of like before we kind of wrap up, during his entrance to the ring for his ceremony, the TV announcer, who we think is possibly Kentaro Hirakawa. Is that right, Carmen?
I wasn't able to. I'm not great at recognizing the voices because it might be Hirakawa. It might be, if you're talking to the person who's actually talking to the crowd, that might be just the ring announcer talking to the crowd.
No, it's the person talking to the TV audience, so the TV announcer.
Oh, I thought when you were asking me before, I thought you said to the audience. I thought you meant literally the person talking on the mic.
No, to the person on TV.
It might be that Kentaro.
Okay, so he says this great line as Jumbo's walking to the ring. He says, he talks about the Showa era, the start of professional wrestling. He says Ricky Dozan planted the seeds of pro wrestling. Giant Baba grew the tree with a thick trunk, which would be All Japan, and Jumbo Tsuruta made the tree blossom, which I think is just so poetic and really like kind of I feel spot on for like what we know about the history of All Japan Pro Wrestling.
That's what the third. I think I split wrestling up in my head. That I think of Jumbo. That's what the third gen. I consider them the third generation of pro wrestling. Jumbo, Tenryu, Choshu, Fujinami. Those are the guys who, they were never going to be as big as they were never going to become as big as stars long term as Ricky Dozan, Baba, and Inoki. They never hit that shadow, but they are the turning point aesthetically. They are the ones that make the tree blossom. They make ProRes what it is,
Jumbo's hepatitis would develop into liver cancer as well as
Yes.
cirrhosis of his liver. This would precipitate his return back to Japan. And due to the strict regulations involving organ transplants in Japan, Jumbo had to go to both Australia and South Korea in search of a liver donor. And he would finally find one in Manila in the Philippines. He would have his liver transplant on May 13th, 2000 at the National Kidney and Transplant Institute in Quezon City in the Philippines, and unfortunately would die from complications, which is listed as uncontrollable bleeding due to the surgery. He died at the very young age of 49 years old, and he was survived by his wife Yasuka and his three sons, Noaki, Ken, and Yuji Tsuruta.
There is one thing that I really like. This is a detail that is really important to me so apparently the strict laws about organ transplantation in Japan. So at one point he was going to get something with his brother, but they couldn't make that happen. So anyway, this is something that apparently really bothered Misawa. And Misawa, because after Jumbo's death and during the Noah era, Misawa, he didn't put his own organs up for donation, but he started to push to promote like organ donor cards at events to people to sign in. And I don't know if this may just be a coincidence, but this is something that I cannot let unmentioned. Shortly after Misawa died, there was a Japanese House of Representatives or whatever. They did a vote and they loosened the rules. They loosened the rules. Jumbo might have helped change a lot of lives. That's something that I really want to make sure gets noticed. That Misawa, his campaign, I don't know how important he was in the grand scheme of things, but he might have had an impact.
I would say there's a good chance of that happening because like Jumbo was such a popular figure
I know that Yasuko ran a nonprofit related to this for a while after he died. So
yeah, I mean, Jumbo was like really famous in Japanese society at large.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much impact Misawa's campaigning had.
I think it helped, of course.
Yeah.
I do think it helped because but I mean, just it's kind of like springing off what I feel would be like the publicity surrounding like why he didn't have to die. Like this, I think that's probably something that was really probably heavily pushed in the larger Japanese society and news and stuff like that it was completely avoidable if rules are a little bit different. But I just want to go through a list of recommendations for matches kind of across the span of his career. Some of this is culled from a great article over at Voices Wrestling by my friend Case Lowe, but I've seen all these matches and I totally agree with them. So from 77, March 5th, 77, Jumbo Tsuruta versus Billy Robinson. From 1983, December 12th of 1983, Jumbo and Tenryu versus Brody and Hansen. Jumbo and Tenryu versus Choshu and Yatsu from January 28th, 1986. Jumbo and Yatsu, the Olympics versus Tenryu and Toshiaki Kawada. Great, one of my favorite Kawada matches, along with the one with Hansen and Gordy beating the crap out of Kawada.
Is that the one from February?
Yes, 23rd.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
February 23rd, 1989. Jumbo and Tenryu singles match for the Triple Crown. This is the title change, June 5th, 1989. Jumbo and Yatsu versus Tenryu and Stan Hansen. One of my favorite tag matches of all time. December 6th, 1989, Real World Tag League Finals.
That gets so underrated. It's amazing.
From 1990, Jumbo, Kabuki, the Great Kabuki, and Fuchi versus Misawa, Kobashi, and Akira Taue. And finally, of course, Jumbo versus Mitsuharu Misawa, June 8th, 1990. Do you have any things you want to add to that list?
I would add, if you want to get into 70s Jumbo, the tag matches, those are very traditional. That might be, those might be a little hard. Wait on those a little bit. There are a couple of Jack Briscoe matches. There's one in January of 74. I don't have the date on hand. And then there's the NWA United National title match in August 76. Definitely watch Terry Funk. There is a match he had against Emil Mascaras in August of 77. I wrote an article about that a couple years ago for Fanbyte. It's actually on my own blog, which we can talk about. I'll talk about in just a minute. We can maybe plug that in the show notes or whatever. Hell, just ask me on Twitter. I'll be willing to tell you about some good Jumbo matches from different eras. You know, I've seen about 650 of them. So
we're just gonna closing it off. Before I get to that, I just wanted to also, for my own notes, I relied a lot on kind of the work of like people over at Slam Wrestling, Greg Oliver and John Molinaro, who is like probably one of the best like people to write about Jumbo was John Molinaro. So check out those. You can find them like if you do, internet search for like Jumbo Tsuruta articles. You usually like the kind of the stuff written by Greg Oliver and John Molinaro will pop up. You have something to add there?
I wrote a lot. It's some of my earliest work. It's not my best, but I wrote a sort of chapter by chapter, like bullet point summary of a biography that I took a lot from here. The Strongest Champion of Eternity, written by Kagehiro Osano in 2020. I wrote if you look at Pro Wrestling Only, they will have the Jumbo Tsuruta bio, and you'll see chapter by chapter posts. I also wrote something about more about the Pillars era, the Hidetoshi Ichinose autobiography about his time working with All Japan. That's under the 2019 Four Pillars bio. Those posts aren't the best organized, but there is a wealth of detail in there.
Well, Cameron, just send me the links and I'll include them in the show notes when I write up the show notes for this on the site. Let's just go quickly through his accomplishments, championships and accomplishments. He's been the NWA International Heavyweight Champion 3 times, International Tag Team Champion 9 times, 6 times with Baba, twice with Tenryu, once with Yoshiaki Yatsu, NWA United National Champion 5 times. That was kind of his belt, right? That was his belt. They
passed it on down to Tenryu after he got promoted up. It was the number 2 belt. Yeah.
PWF World Heavyweight title, once PWF World Tag Team title, twice. Once with Tiger Mask 2, aka Mitsuharu Misawa, and Yoshiaki Yatsu once. Triple Crown Heavyweight title 3 times, World Tag Team Championship 7 times. Yoshiaki Yatsu was his partner for 5 of those.
Time too. That was like 5 years. Yeah,
that was 5 days. Yeah,
busy.
The Great Kabuki once, and Akira Taue once. Champion Carnival 1980, 1991. Who did he beat in the finals in 1991?
Hansen.
World's Strongest Tag Termination League, aka the Real World Tag League. 1970. You can
just call it Real World Tag.
Yeah, I do. 78 and 80 with Baba, 84, 86 with Tenryu, and 87 with Yoshiaki Yatsu. AWA World Heavyweight title, once defeating Dick Bakugo, dropping it to Rick Martel. And then he won a form of the United National title in Florida, I believe.
I think that might have been with something with like Eddie Ram or something. Yeah.
And then in Detroit, he was the NWA World Tag Team Championship, the Detroit version of this title with Giant Baba.
They did a run in like July of 80. Yeah. Tokyo
Sports, he was Wrestler of the Year, 83, 84, 91. He won the Technique Award in 74, 86,
See
and
what
88.
I mean about him being like the big technical wrestler? That's
right.
part of what that was.
Outstanding Performance Award, 75, 76, 81. The Service Award in 1998, kind of like a lifetime, Lifetime Achievement Award, which is also what he also won, the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2000. Tag Team of the Year, 78, 80, 82 with Baba. 83, 85 with Tenryu, 1989 with Yatsu. Match of the Year, 76 against Russia Kimura, March 28th of that year. In 77 versus Mil Mascaras, August 25th of that year. 1978, Harley Race, January 20th. Match of the Year with Giant Baba, teaming with Giant Baba against Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk on December 11th, 1980. 1985 versus Riki Choshu on November 4th. 1987 versus Tenryu on August 31st. And finally, 1989 versus Tenryu on June 5th, which we talked about. And Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer's newsletter. He won Feud of the Year in 1990 and 1991 for his legendary program with Mitsuharu Misawa. He was the Wrestler of the Year in 1991. Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame. I think he's in the inaugural class of 96.
Yep.
That's the inaugural class. You gotta put Jumbo in the inaugural class for sure. Anyways, Cameron, thank you very much. This is Jumbo Tsuruta, everyone. I don't know what else we could talk about, but if you want to learn more,
I could do a whole Jerry Lewis telethon about Jumbo Tsuruta. I'm telling you.
Well, we're trying to keep this under 5 hours here on this show in particular here at Post Wrestling. But if people want to learn more about like your work, I know you got something coming up that you want to talk about.
That's what I want to plug.
And then also like the links. What sites can people find your writing at? We're gonna have the links. You're gonna send me the links. We're gonna put them in the show description. But tell us, where can people find more of your work, Cameron?
So the big place is prowrestlingonly.com. As I said much earlier in the episode, the ProRes history, and I will give him a link. I will put a link to that in the show notes. The other thing that I have a blog called From Milo to Misawa. It's a pun on an old wrestling history book, From Milo to Londos. My original thing was I have a few blog posts on it. There's a blog post about the fall of the JWA. It's kind of outdated. I know some better stuff now. I have a couple things about Jumbo there, but the thing is, I am about to turn that into a podcast. I am planning to, and it's a good thing we're talking about Jumbo here, because as I alluded to much earlier, the Idol Showdown, Jumbo Tsuruta versus Mil Mascaras, is going to be the subject of my first episode. It's going to be a lot different. I want to do something that's never really been done before with ProRes podcasts. A lot of people just talk about their opinion. It's a valuable part of the discussion, talking about our, aesthetic views of matches, but I want to do something different. I want to do for wrestling what Cocaine and Rhinestones did for country music. I want to make, I plan to write it. I've already written part of the script. I plan to drop it on the anniversary of the match on August 25th. Stay tuned for that. It is a wonderful, wonderful story about the birth of Mil Mascaras in Japan, about how Lucha got over in Japan, about entrance music, it's a story about music, about fandom, about love. It's a beautiful story about pro wrestling, and I am so proud that I'm going to be able to be, and I want to tell that story the best I can. Stay tuned for the debut episode of From Milo to Misawa.
I look forward to it, and I'll promote it on my social media when you send me the link for it, and I look forward to listening to it and sharing it with a lot of people. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up about Jumbo Tsuruta? Inoki had his Ichini-san, but Jumbo had his and he did his final one in his retirement ceremony at Budokan Hall. Fittingly enough. Anyways, thank you to Cameron for joining us, talking a lot of great information about Jumbo Tsuruta. We're going to continue the biography series. I originally wasn't going to do Tenryu, but I thought I should do Tenryu. We're going to do Tenryu, and then we're gonna finally do at some point in my life, we're going to do Giant Baba. I don't know when. We'll see in the next couple of years before I retire from podcasting, hopefully. But I want to thank everyone for listening to The Long and Winding Railroad here at postwrestling.com. Please support the show. Go to chopped-tees.com. There's a lot of merchandise that's, it always does well. but you can always use a boost. The Long and Winding Railroad t-shirts are there, the hoodies. We have my other show, Post Perez. We have a t-shirt for that. And of course, like the stuff I do over at the Post Wrestling Cafe, MCU Later with Rich Fan. We have a shirt and a hoodie for that in 2 different colors, believe it or not. Anyways, go to chopped-tees.com. And it's all locally sourced, so like you don't pay anything for ship. The shipping is included in the cost, and it's going to get to you pretty quick. There's no international fees, because if you're in Europe or United Kingdom, it's going to get sourced there. If you're in North America, Canada, United States, it's going to get sourced there, so forth and so on. And thanks for everyone's support for the show. And until next time, I will say goodbye. And then there, great shot of Cameron just put up a great shot of Jumbo Tsuruta, but very smiling, holding up is a Santa Claus there. Anyways, until next time, until the next episode, I will say see you later and goodbye.